It's Friday night. It's the preview show. It's the No Nay Never podcast.
Hello and welcome to the preview show from the No Nay Never podcast. I'm producer Matt, sitting in for Natalie again this week as she is swamped with work. And joining me as ever is our main man who puts all the stats and information together, Statman Dave. Dave, good evening. How are you?
Hi there, Matt. I'm very well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Just kind of, getting over those two defeats in the space of 3 or 4 days. It's kind of put a dent in everything. Actually, I saw a tweet today that suggested that it was a tactical move by Sean Dyche to make him less appealing for any of these Premier League managerial positions that may become available. But I'm sure that's not the case. Yeah.
Taking one for the team.
Well, yeah, you could put it that way. Kind of, just taking the shine off his reputation for a week or so. It was a disappointing few days really for the Clarets, wasn't it? We certainly expected more from the Palace game at least, but they seem to have a bit of a sign over us at the minute to be able to come and get a result at the turf. And then City, they were just too good. They were hurting, I think, from that draw at Newcastle, and really just wanted to get themselves back on track. And they played some of the best football they've played all season, I think.
Yeah, we've gone in fits and starts a little bit. We've sort of lost, 3 in a row, wasn't it? We lost, then we won a couple of games, and now we've lost a couple. We seem to be going from one extreme to the other. We win a couple of games, and supporters saying, "Oh, we're going on a good run. We're up to 7th, chance of Europe," and then we lose 2 games. It's like, "Oh, we're looking down now. We've got tricky games between now and Christmas." So it's a difficult one, isn't it? We know in this league, there's no easy games, and there can be times like that where you have difficult runs. Our season certainly isn't going to be defined by a defeat to Manchester City, but the Palace defeat was a little bit more disappointing, bearing in mind that they only had really 2 shots on target and scored 2 goals, and we had our chances and didn't really take them. So it could have been very different on Saturday. But yeah, Tuesday, Manchester City were definitely on their A game, and it's tough to play them when they're playing like that.
It certainly is. I've thought in the past that we may have become a team that goes on these runs. We saw last season that we really struggled in the first half of the season, and we couldn't get a win. And then we went on that unbeaten run that kind of equaled or exceeded our top flight unbeaten run record. It does feel that this team kind of, when they get on a good run, they can stay on a good run, but then when they get in a bit of a rut, it can be a bit hard for them to come out of it. Looking forward to the games we've got between now and Christmas: Spurs, who we'll come on to in a minute, Newcastle, Bournemouth away, Everton away. The games that could really go either way for us, I think, and we could find ourselves by Christmas still up in this kind of top half, and with a quite healthy points total, or we could find ourselves being dragged down a bit, I think, really. What do you think? We'll see.
Yeah, it's really
Go on. Sorry, Dave.
It's really tight in there. You look at the points. I mean, we've just heard this evening when we're recording, Marco Silva's been sacked.
Oh, has he gone now? I missed that one.
And yeah, they're on, I think, 14 points. They're only 4 points behind Burnley. They're only 2 points behind Bournemouth in 12th. So it's one of those where it's really, really tight. Apart from perhaps the bottom 2 who are a little bit further behind, the other teams, there's not really a great deal in it. And any team that wins even like a couple of games in a row can make a real difference to your position in the league. I mean, Liverpool are far and away at the top. Then obviously you've got Manchester City and Leicester, but everyone down from that, there's not much in it really in terms of the points. So Sean Dyche talks about fine lines, and that really is the case in this division. And if you can put a decent run together, back-to-back wins in the Premier League are invaluable. If you can get a win at home and then a win away the following week, or vice versa, it makes a huge difference. So we'll be keeping an eye on it, won't we? And we'll look how we do between now and Christmas. But we'll probably have a better idea by the turn of the year how things are, whether we are pushing on, trying to consolidate, get above that 10th position we were in, or whether we're looking down. But there's a long way to go in the season.
Absolutely. So let's, before we move on and look at this weekend's game, our last 2 podcasts were both preview shows. And at the end of the Manchester City preview show, Dave posed another question for you. The question being, the FA Cup third round match, which took place between Burnley and Manchester City in January 1991, was a first for Turf Moor. But can you tell us the reason why? So, Dave, would you like to give us the answer, and then we'll see who supplied correct answers?
Yeah, the correct answer was it was the first time that a Burnley home game had been played on a Sunday at Turf Moor. We'd played a couple of other previous games on a Sunday. We'd played at Millwall in 1983, a Sunday game down there, and we'd also played the Sherpa Van Trophy in 1988. But this was the first time that Turf Moor had hosted a Sunday game.
So we had a DM on Twitter from Rob Thomas, as always, being correct. And he points out it was Colin Hendry who scored that goal for City that knocked us out of the cup that year. And we also had another regular, an email in from Bryn Jones. And he was quite delighted with that question, had him thinking for a while. But he did supply the correct answer. And also remembered how Bob Lord was very famously against Sunday football when it started back in 1974. So it was quite a wait before it actually appeared at Turf Moor. And I think there was another correct answer as well, Dave, was there, that you saw?
Martin Barnes had replied to me. I'd posted it separately. I'd done an in case you missed it tweet the following day after the podcast had gone live. I think it was probably on Tuesday morning. And Martin Barnes was the first reply back with the correct answer. He knew that it was the first game that had been played at Turf Moor on a Sunday. So well done if anyone else knew that answer.
Brilliant. And we'll have another question at the end of this show.
Opposition stats.
So moving on, looking forwards, next game for Burnley is the trip to the Tottenham Hotspur this Saturday, another 3:00 kickoff. And Dave, can you give us some history about Tottenham?
Yes, well, the Hotspur Football Club, as they were known back then, was founded in 1882. That's the same year as Burnley, by a group of North London schoolboys. In 1884, a couple of years later, the club was renamed as Tottenham Hotspur, and they later turned professional in 1895. But it wasn't until 1908 that the club was admitted to the Football League. But before that, in 1901, the club became the first and only, to date, non-league team since the establishment of the Football League in 1888 to win the FA Cup. They defeated Sheffield United after a replay.
Wow, that's something you probably won't expect to happen again in any time in the near future.
No, not anytime soon.
No, there probably won't be any surprises in the next bit. But what are the nicknames that Tottenham have?
Predominantly Spurs, surprisingly, as an abbreviation of Hotspur from the name, although the Lily Whites is also less commonly used due to the colour of their kit.
Excellent. And now the next interesting bit, tell us about their ground.
Yes, well, it's going to be a new ground we're playing at on Saturday, the brand new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, as it's currently known, as the club haven't yet sold naming rights to a sponsor. It was completed 9 months later than originally planned. Eventually came into use late on last season, that was in April, at an eye-watering cost of over £1 billion, reportedly, which was more than treble the original estimate. So I think someone's going to get told off with all the additional spend that they had to do. And it's obviously affected them in terms of the transfers they've been able to make as well. I think they've gone a few transfer windows and not been able to sign players that they would have done previously. The stadium's situated right next to the location of the old White Hart Lane ground. You may remember that when the work started on it, they were still playing at White Hart Lane, and it was kind of on the one of the corners, wasn't it, the way it was set up. So that's been part of the process. And they've now got 62,000 seats, which is a huge increase on the 36,000, which have been the capacity of the club, what they've been limited to over recent years. Burnley's ticket allocation for Saturday is 3,038, and that easily sold out long before tickets went on general sale. So we'll have a decent following, just over 3,000 Clarets down there on Saturday afternoon.
Excellent. Yes, I think there's quite a few members of the No Nay Never team managed to get tickets for that, so that hopefully we'll get lots of good pre and post match reactions, and it'll be quite a good podcast next week when they all get back. So moving on then, back to a bit more history. Can you give us some details on Spurs' all-time goal scorer?
Yes, Jimmy Greaves is Spurs' all-time goal scorer, top goal scorer. He scored 266 goals in 380 matches for Spurs in all competitions. And Jimmy Greaves has also scored the most goals for Spurs against Burnley with 15. It's worth mentioning he also scored another 6 goals against the Clarets for Chelsea earlier in his career, meaning that his combined tally of 21 is more than any other opposition player.
Probably take some beating that as well, really. Even Sergio Aguero's probably got a bit of a distance to go to catch that.
He's not even the Thai City player, so yes, I think there's a long way to go on that one. That may never be beaten.
Hopefully not, I think, is the the line on that one.
Definitely.
And moving on for a bit more history, the heaviest Burnley defeat down at Spurs.
We've lost 2 away matches against Spurs by a margin of 7 goals. Back in September 1930, we suffered an 8-1 defeat, and in September 1968, the home side won 7-0, and that included a hat-trick from that man again, Jimmy Greaves.
There he is again, indeed. So let's flip it over and let's have a look at what Burnley's biggest win down there is.
Well, there's been 3 away matches that we've won down at Spurs by a margin of 3 goals. 2 of those were cup matches. There was a League Cup quarter-final win in January 1983, which was also Burnley's most recent away win. A 3-0 win in the FA Cup third round in the snow in January 1963, and also another 3-0 win in the league in April 1955.
Oh, so we're probably due a result down there, really. It's been a long time coming.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Just remind us what happened last season when we went down there.
Well, it was also December we played them last season, coincidentally, when we travelled down to London to play Spurs for our last ever match at White Hart Lane, and that was just 10 days before Christmas. It looked like we'd done enough to earn a point until Christian Eriksen popped up in added time to give Spurs a 1-0 win and all 3 points, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, indeed, yeah. Right, the next interesting point about Spurs, and something else that's changed since last season, or in fact since last month. Tell us about their manager.
Yeah, we have 1 or 2 managerial changes, haven't we? And the latest one in at Spurs is 56-year-old Jose Mario dos Santos Mourinho Felix from Portugal, better known to you and me as Jose Mourinho. He's now in charge at Spurs, having already managed Chelsea and Manchester United in the Premier League. He does like to keep it quiet, but he won 3 Premier League titles in his spells as manager of Chelsea, and he has a distinguished managerial career across Europe, although his most recent spell at Manchester United was slightly underwhelming and ended with his sacking last December. Following the departure of Mauricio Pochettino last month, Mourinho was appointed as Spurs' new manager the following morning.
Yeah, they didn't hang about with that one, and they had a bit of a new manager bounce, but it seemed to have brought back down to earth last night by United with Mourinho's first trip back to Old Trafford. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform on Saturday against us. But
we've got history with Mr. Mourinho.
Absolutely, it'll be an intriguing contest. Let's have a look at the head-to-head then. Our all-time record for games away at Spurs.
Yeah, in total, in terms of all games, we've played 58 times. We've won 12, drawn 11, and lost 35. That's a win percentage of 20.7%. Now, that may not sound particularly impressive, but 20%, i.e. 1 win in 5, is Burnley's average all-time away win percentage in all competitions against the teams in this season's Premier League. And for top flight away matches only, it's slightly better. We've played 39, we've won 10, drawn 8, and lost 21. That's a win percentage of 25.6%. But for since 2009, for the Premier League era matches, Burnley have lost 4 times and drawn just 1 after the 5 meetings down at Spurs.
And I assume that one was the one at Wembley a couple of years back.
That was Chris Wood scoring the late equaliser for point in that game in his debut, wasn't it? That one.
It was quite some debut. So tell us about some of the players who've played for Burnley and for Spurs in their time.
Yeah, we're looking back. Players who've played for both teams since the Second World War include Ralph Coates, Peter Crouch, Paul Gascoigne, Aaron Lennon, obviously from the current squad, Dean Marney, Paul Robinson, Paul Stewart, Mitchell Thomas, Kieran Trippier, and Chris Waddle are just a selection of players who played for both teams.
There's quite a few contemporary, more recent names cropping up this week in that list, there, isn't there?
Yeah, sometimes you've got to go further back. I mean, there are a few other players from further back, but there's some notable names, certainly from the last 20 years or so in there, aren't there?
Yes. And finally, last detail for this Saturday's match is who's the man in the middle? Who's our referee this week, Dave?
We've got Kevin Friend. He was in charge for our 3-0 home win over West Ham United just last month. He's been appointed as a referee for Saturday's match, and Lee Mason is the video assistant referee.
Well, we'll see what that throws up for us then.
Statman Dave's Stat of the Week.
Now, of course, every week you hold something back for us. You have a little nugget of information that you'd like to share with us. So give us your stat or stats of the week, Dave.
Yes, well, we've got 2 miscellaneous stats of the week this week. So starting off, Burnley's last 2 victories in away matches against Spurs have both been helped by an unusual coincidence. In our last away win, which was a memorable League Cup quarter-final at White Hart Lane in 1983, 2 second-half own goals from Graham Roberts helped Burnley to a 4-1 win. And in 1973, for our last league win against Spurs, a 3-2 victory included 2 first-half own goals, this time from Mike England. And for the second stat of the week, this is going back to season 1960-61. In another match at White Hart Lane in December 1960, Burnley were 4-0 down after 35 minutes. When John Kennelly got a goal back for the Clarets before half-time, it seemed like it would only be a consolation. But second-half goals from Jimmy Robson, Ray Pointer, and another goal from John Kennelly made it 4-4 and a most unlikely draw. Both sets of players were applauded by the referee as they left the pitch. Spurs, of course, went on to win the league and FA Cup double at the end of that season.
Wow, some game that was. So, how do you feel about this Saturday's game after these back-to-back defeats? Do you think the Clarets can get a point or 3 away at this new stadium?
It'll be a difficult one. We know, well, going anywhere away from home in the Premier League, they're difficult matches, and we've seen the historical win percentage is 1 in 5. You're not getting many wins in there. I mean, and I think I've not got the exact stats for the Premier League, but I don't think it's even quite as good as that. So it's tough. It's tough in the Premier League. It's tough away from home, and it's tough against the so-called Big Six. Although perhaps you could argue this season that Tottenham and their form don't qualify for that anymore, and perhaps maybe a better time to play them than it has been in previous seasons. We've mentioned already that we got the point. We are capable of doing that. Chris Wood came on as a sub on his debut and scored, got us an equaliser down at Wembley. Burnley sometimes have a tendency to do well on the new grounds. It's a new ground for the team, a new ground for the fans to see on Saturday. So it'll be one where we're going out there. We have got injury problems. Sean Dyche has had his press conference today, and there are more than 1 or 2 injuries. We've got a long list of injuries, which we've been lucky, haven't we, really? In probably season to date, we've had the odd injury, but we've not had too many together. We're missing quite a few players, which might have a bearing on things. But I think we've got the squad, we've got the team to fill in those gaps and go out there and put on a performance. And as you say, hopefully we can get a result and reverse the trend of the last 2 matches, which we've not got anything out of.
I mean, looking at the names that you mentioned today, you wouldn't be surprised to see him put it out the same starting 11 as he did on Tuesday night. Given that it's a big club, a big traditional Big Six club away from home. He'll be looking to keep it tight. So I think personally, I wouldn't be surprised. If Westwood doesn't make it. To see that same formation because he does like to stick with a lineup, and if his options are limited, I think we could quite possibly see that same 11 lining up for us on Saturday as well.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those as well. Ashley Barnes is one who may be pushing for a start. We may look for a slightly different formation, so he's got a few options there. I guess we'll not find out till 2:00 on Saturday afternoon.
Fantasy Premier League update.
And the second part of the preview show this week is our look at the Fantasy Premier League and an update from that. Now, as we record this on Thursday night, there are still 2 Premier League matches being played, and so game week 15 hasn't been completed yet. So this update is for game week 14 from last weekend, and we will collect the data from game week 15 and 16 and bring it to you in next week's preview show. So Dave, do you want to give us an update from game week 14 and tell us who the movers and shakers and any changes in the No Nay Never Fantasy Premier League?
Yeah, leading the way after game week 14, which, as we said, is the weekend's games, is still Tall Paul. But he's got a much narrower advantage at the top with just 2 points. He only picked up 37 points last weekend, which was the same as Natalie, which must be very disappointing for him. He's 2 points ahead of Bennett Howarth in second place on 840 points. And moving up to third place now is Dan Barnes with his team Do or Dyche. And for a change, I'm going to name check the other managers in positions 4 to 10 this week, just as a summary. We've got going down in descending order John Sutcliffe, Rob Greenwood, our own Richard Steele, Michael Freeman, Joshua Bedgood, John Pickup, and Paul Gibson, all of whom are now within striking distance of those top 3 places.
Very good. Yeah, Richard Steele's doing good for the No Nay Never team within the No Nay Never League. Who was the highest scoring manager this week though? Who got the most points this last weekend?
Yeah, for last weekend, Berrien William Jones scored an impressive 81 points, proving it's possible to make significant improvements from further down the table as well. So all is not lost, even if you're in the bottom half of the table. You can have a good week and make some leaps up the table.
And how did yourself and Natalie get on this week? Any leaps there?
Well, no, Natalie had gone down again to 162nd. So that's back into the relegation zone, into the bottom 3 with 37 points. That's 565 points overall. Although I had a slightly better weekend, I went up to 125th place with 59 points, with 667 points overall. But you're ahead of both of us, Matt.
Oh, well, by sheer chance more than anything, I think, really. And I can't imagine there weren't any Burnley members in the Dream Team this week, but any highlights from that?
Well, yeah, as you say, there weren't any Burnley players in the Week 14 Dream Team after the weekend defeat at the hands of Crystal Palace. The highest scoring player overall for last weekend was Liverpool defender Virgil van Dijk. He scored 17 points. And Leicester City's Jamie Vardy, who can't stop scoring at the moment, still the highest scoring player of the season to date with 110, although that'll be even more than that now because he obviously scored a penalty, didn't he, for Leicester in midweek?
He did, yeah. I think Van Dijk helped me out a bit last weekend, helped me move up a few places. So, as we said, we'll have another Fantasy Premier League update next Friday in the preview show, and we'll keep you up to date.
Statman Dave's quiz question.
So finally this week, as we mentioned at the start, we have got this week's quiz question. So Dave, fire away and give our listeners this week's teaser.
Okay, we've mentioned this match already as Burnley's last away win against Spurs, but who was Burnley's manager when the Clarets went to White Hart Lane and won 4-1 in the League Cup quarter-final in January 1983? That was the Milk Cup, the Milk Marketing Board was sponsoring it that season. So who was Burnley's manager for the Milk Cup quarter-final win in January 1983?
Okay, if you know the answer to that, feel free to tweet us or message us on Twitter at No Nay Never. You can post on our No Nay Never Facebook page, or you can email us at podcast@nonaynever.net. And as always, we'll give you the answer to the question at the start of our next preview show. Now, the preview show is researched and compiled each week by our marvellous Statman Dave with information from his Burnley stats page. Dave, where can people find that if they want to delve deeper into some of the stats you've mentioned this week?
Yeah, we've got a short link for that. It's bit, that's bit.ly/Burnley stats, and that's all in lowercase.
Marvellous. Well, thank you as ever, Dave, for coming on and sharing your information and opinions on the matches gone and the match that's to come this Saturday down at Tottenham. many Clarets will be travelling down, so safe journeys to all of you. There'll be many members of the No Name Never team there. If you happen to see one, say hello, give them your thoughts in a pre or post match reaction. I think Liam will be down there, probably wandering around trying to grab as many voices as he can, and we'll compile them all and